Alec Van Tresser loved two things in life: his home and his women, though it was sometimes hard to separate the two in his mind. His women made his home. His home was women. In his home, he had company and comfort at the snap of his fingers. But he did not hoard his palace's pleasures. Alec Van Tresser's brothel welcomed the most men for the fewest coins. As most cozy evenings would go, Alec sat in his so-called office. The walls reached high, displaying paintings of swirls and curves with no real meaning. The books on the irregularly shaped bookshelves contained more bragging rights than tales enjoyed. The empty fish tank served only the purpose of casting its watery effect along the dim red room. By the center, a few steps down into the lounge, was Alec's throne, his curved, cushioned couch with plentiful pillows. Alec sat on his throne like he did the night before and the year before then. He sat there sunk into his black couch with his white pillows and two women, one woman to hold his brandy and the other himself. Both gave their second hands to his shoulders. It was all typical procedures, until Irina entered with the name of a familiar guest. Casimir at this hour. Alec snapped his fingers and had his favorite white robe brought over. He put it on. Send him in. Casimir came in as Alec stood. He wiped his hand and offered it. Kaz. Alec, Kaz said, sniffling the air as he entered the room. He was sounding stuffy. It was always an unwanted moment to stand face to face with Casimir. If there was one purchase Alec couldn't afford, it was height. He was short, and within Kaz's height, he felt shorter. Kaz was lean and long, with curled hair that naturally provided him extra length. Alec's black hair was never without gel to slick it back and up in a vain effort to buy him that needed height. Finally, Kaz released his sweaty grip, and the two took their seats on opposite ends of the couch. I would have figured you to just be waking up now, Alec said. Have some company. With a wave of his fingers, one of the women joined Kaz and began to massage him. Thank you, Kaz said. And I haven't actually slept. Could you spare some brandy? Of course. Another wave of the fingers, and the woman poured Kaz a shot of brandy. It was Roland brandy. Expensive. The best there was, Alec thought. Kaz reached into his coat, broke open a small piece of paper, and sprinkled some powder into his shot before swigging it down. Are we too young to remember the old times? I would hope so. I'm only 33, Alec said. Really? So am I. Happy birthday. Kaz blinked dumbly for a moment. Alec worked in an awkward nod. But you ask because... Kaz scratched at a spot on his throat. I ask because the city's changed. This isn't the Caspida anyone remembers. Bum and Biz been affected. Because yes, I remember the old times. Do you? Do you remember when it was okay? When it was common nightly business to teach disrespectful punks a lesson, even if it meant killing them. I remember having to pay kids to toss bodies over the walkways. They used to pile up by the bridge outside, Alec said. The memory of fines came pouring in for Alec. Killing was a messy business, Alec thought, even when it was affordable. He was thankful it wasn't his business. Bodies used to pile up, Kaz said. But still you remember. Didn't always pay to have the bodies tossed away. I remember that too, Alec chuckled. No, I was sure the older kids were doing the deed the night before. It's tough out there when you're young. The city likes to forget that. This city had a heart, Alec, Kaz sniffed. And it pumped blood. That forsaken law! What's a heart without its blood? That blood's gone south, Alec said. The war will end and the walkways will drink again. Why don't you have another drink yourself? Fingers waved and brandy poured. It wouldn't matter if they all died down there, Alec. Kaz put aside his glass of brandy to Alex's surprise. I've killed someone. The woman's hand slowed down and Alec noticed the water in Kaz's eyes. You killed someone. A someone. Last night. I was higher than bases at this club. I don't even remember the place's name, but soot, the goods they had and the titties flying there, it was an experience. I had this woman loose and ready to own in the back, but you know how it is in the clubs. You can't just toss a coin and expect basic human dignity. See, there was this extraordinary bastard, a yuppie playing the lone wolf. I'm talking zero family representation. The kid was a fish out of water treading on my territory. I see him where? I see him at my broad's back end, and the world was freaked. I could see their auras mixing, Alec. I was up there. I took out this. Kaz placed a switchblade on the table next to his drink. And I took him out. I was in the moment, and then it was in his neck. I still see him now in his pretty boy face. That neck painted the walls. He just drained and... I get the picture, Alec interrupted. I get how this may be problematic. It wasn't problematic in the old times, Kaz said. Alec leaned forward and poured his next drink. You're more well-connected than I am. You've climbed higher up against worse odds. The family will protect you, and I give you my women, Kaz. Tresser's brothel is open to you. All of Tresser's lessers free of charge. Alec's chuckle didn't last long. Kaz was somber. Oh, I appreciate that. But that protection is limited, considering that law and my record. You've danced through the courts a few times, if I remember correctly. That you know of. Kaz's eyes were aiming for the floor now. Other incidents have been more quietly kept, but are still on that record. Alec. His words were beginning to slur and mesh together. I won't be able to buy myself out of murder under the draft. They're going to put me on that forsaken draft if I go to court. The safety and comfort warmly lit inside Alex's back evaporated, and with a chill, his spine felt hollowed. I see. It had clicked in his mind where this was going, yet still he insisted to say, I don't quite see where I fit into all of this. Kaz was also nervous, and his latest sniff added a shake to his whole body. I would like for you to take the fall on this. The words fell heavy on Alec's husked spirit, and for a moment all he could do was rest his eyes. And this was already discussed with the family? Yes. Kaz was fighting to regain eye contact. They've approved of the idea and will handle this. Your record's godly clean. They can buy you a first-class cell, and from what I heard, this could be a 3-year sentence if played right. Alec, wishing he had done this much sooner, waved his hand and sent the woman out. I've no doubt it would be a fabulous dungeon. It's not what you have now, I get that, Kaz said. But think of the interest, the favors you would be owed. There's no question. This could be an opportunity greater than anything else that could slump through your doors, and you would have my eternal gratitude. Kaz nodded. Okay, that ain't worth spit. Don't look at me like I'm some kind of clown trying to cheat you. We'll make sure you get more out of this and keep your visitors list full. There won't be a night where your women don't come by. It still feels like a king's coffin. Igor will accommodate you, Kaz said confidently. I swear on my life, I swear on the prosperity of my manhood, we will make this bearable for you." There was a calm quietness that came by to offer Alec some inner assurance. "So I will confess, I will be sentenced, and I shall be cared for." "We're not gonna let you fight in some royals' war," Kaz promised. "Like I said, I'm pretty sure this will be a 3-year sentence. War should be over by then." Alec took Kaz's switchblade and poured his glass one last time. "Well, to the next 3 years then." The next time Alec stepped out from his brothel, out from the main hall and its provocative statues, the sense of imprisonment had overcome him. Behind him was his home, his kingdom. Ahead in his future, Alec knew his new cage would be one of infinite disappointments. A cheap hotel room of a cell that oozed with mediocrity. Something that would tease what he once had. A forgery of luxury. This would be his damnation. Alec could only bite his tongue as he breathed in the mineral-scented air. No matter how horribly his hidden anger twisted his insides, Alec considered the consequences of refusal far more than the rewards of compliance. He looked up. Towers as far as the eyes could see. He looked to the bridge that connected his walkway to the next. He noted the absence of the occasional body that would appear there. Stepping forward and looking down into the dark abyss below, Alec knew his service was hardly a choice. When the time for trial came, Alec had donned his classiest attire. A black suit that faintly swirled in pattern, much like his beloved paintings. It was a generous gift given to him, which complemented his tastes. Under it he wore a gray vest, a silver watch chained inside it, and a darker ascot tucked in carefully. His hair was especially slick and raised. Alec intended to dress stylishly for what he regarded as his funeral. After ceremonially kissing his personal and prized women goodbye, Alec was off to solidify his fate. Making his way to the station, the skyscrapers of Caspida, the obsidian towers that took out the sky, looked down on him in some strange act of judgment. The exciting neon of his lively district did not ward off the feelings of isolation and vulnerability. The sorrow had latched onto his heart, refusing to let go. He was surrendering his life for another, and each step he took to the station made his heart shake faster. A stray dog intercepted him along the way to the station. The shaggy and spotted critter sniffed at his ankle intently. It was a modest relief in the situation he found himself in. Bending down to the dog, Alec shuffled around the dog's hair between its floppy ears. As he partook in the creature's company, a ruckus came from the nearby alley. A raid conducted by the state force. Lowly foot soldiers of the city's law enforcement dressed in gray. Their party had broken a door in the far back and hauled out several ragged inhabitants. "Please," one of the men being dragged out cried. "Please, don't take me in. I can't be drafted. I can't." The officer in the finest coat ended the man's begging with a thrust of his fist to the scared man's gut. It was at that point Alec noticed the dog had been watching the scene with him. When two of the state force officers walked down the alley to the walkway, the dog ran off. As the dog scuttled off, Alec thought to himself how he should have invested in a dog. He hadn't a companion whose love was unconditional since the nights of his youth. Before he could reflect further, the two officers caught his attention. "Captain's in a bad mood tonight," one officer said to the other. "I told you why earlier. His son got drafted," the other said. "And here I thought the state force would be protective of its own," he said as he freely retrieved a newspaper from the open paper machine. Men of the law stealing, Alec thought at first. Then he could see his own name written across the paper, clearly detailing tonight's trial. Shouldn't have muscled in on those family types' territory. The kid's being sent to some place called Ulangrad. I don't know. Haven't heard much else since then. At least I think it's away from the front lines. The officer holding the paper looked over to Alec. He glared, recognizing the brothel owner. Perhaps, Alec thought, that particular officer was a regular to his establishment. His establishment often serviced the rowdiest of the state force. However, he did not want to deal with the hassle of a state escort, or suffer the recognition, for that matter. Before he could be stopped, Alec hurried by, deciding then he would need the companionship of a woman his first night in captivity. At last the trek was over, and Alec entered the well-to-do sky trolley of his financial friend. "Igor, sir." Alec took his seat on the fine leather and faced the old fat cat. Igor Kurchenko was a large, elderly member of Alec's crime family. Igor Kurchenko was his liege, blessed with the looks of a man in his 50s, despite treading in his 70s. If Alec remembered from quiet gossip, Igor may have also been cursed to look like he was in his 50s, back when he was in his 30s. Whatever his age or appearance, he was a shrewd investor and crime commander wise beyond his years. There, with 2 fur-coated bodyguards, was Igor Kurchenko, seated and hunched over like a vulture seeing down his long nose. "Alec, my friend," he spoke with his old accent, "how are you feeling?" The sky trolley began to move between the great metal canyons of industry. "Well enough for trial. Well enough to be drafted?" "No worries." Igor set aside his cane and leaned back into his seat, while Alec's district disappeared behind the corner of a skyscraper. "The trial is as bought as the investigation. Your livelihood is safe, and those 6 years will fly by." Alec had wished Casimir hadn't poisoned his ears with the idea of 3. "Yes, 6 years to think about all I've done." "You mean think about all the women you've done?" Igor entered a wheeze of laughter before clutching his leg to calm himself. "And you shall continue to do them. In my youth, I had to spend at least 6 years in prison. Real prison. Osnaven prison. And war. This could be much worse, Alekvin." "You're right, sir, and I've made my peace," Alec said. "I am ready to take the bullet for the family." Yet it still made him angry. "Oh yes, the family is pleased." The windows showed the dark city pillars sinking as the sky trolley moved upward. "This shall never be forgotten. We'll be sending pleasant tokens of appreciation throughout the sentence. Also, we'll find a way for you to make some money on the inside. I learned to counterfeit in prison, you know." "Maybe I'll make a selm with your face on it, and make me getting screwed on the back," Alec joked to Igor's boisterous delight. Nonetheless, Alec was not having as much fun as him. The sky trolley had moved close to the heart of the city, and the great opening could be seen. The endless skyscrapers all stopped at the center to form a clearing for the Ebony Pyramid, the heart of Gaspida, the atrium chambers, where the barons of the oligopoly ruled. Some of the only functional gardens were situated right there, off of the city's castle. The sky trolley moved along the edge of the core's opening, before heading off into its orange and pink-lit sky alley. As another sky trolley passed by towards the core, Alec reflected on who was really in charge of the city. "This city was developed for money, not for Suruk's manpower pool." "Everyone gets a paycheck from somewhere, my friend," Igor said. "There are truths to our Casimir's raving. Until the draft ends, us upper men cannot simply pay off our fines, just as it is with you and your sentence. This is all temporary." "And who will be temporarily running my brothel?" Alec asked. "No one in particular," Igor said. So my women will be running it? Alec almost laughed, but Igor filled in for his joy. Oh, my friend, my friend. Igor breathed in. It was not the cast of your shadow that kept the Iron Bayers from shooting up your whoredom. The family is eager to demonstrate its influence by the protection of a favorite business while the host is away. Then I am thankful to the family. Alec could see the station perch approaching. And I thank you for seeing me on the way, Igor, sir. Wilt, escort my friend to the courtroom. I don't want any emotional crooks getting ideas seeing him on his own. Obeying Igor's order, the brutish thug by his side stood and opened the sky trolley door for Alec. I will visit with your favorite wine. Until then. And with that, Alec left with Igor's guard, and the sky trolley continued off on its rail. Alec wasn't surprised Igor was clueless of his tastes in liquor. Wine was more for public affairs than actual leisure, Alec always thought. There was no point in speaking up on any level. The courthouse, built into the great sky-concealing tower in front of Alec, was unavoidable. A well-dressed man in the front frisked Alec and confiscated a handgun from Wilt before letting them inside. Following from behind Wilt, Alec entered the Kona District Courthouse. Though the tower served the city's legal needs, the building was actually owned by Tetrov Industries. It was a sad truth indicated by the chemical advertisements between the mock pillars in the front of the building. It spoke to Alec on how justice could be owned or bought. As with any standard courthouse in the city, the entrance hall was long and lit narrowly along its center. The walls on either side were shrouded in darkness and could have stretched farther than one might expect. In that darkness, through sense and not sight, Alec detected camouflaged guardians sneaking back and forth. Judiciary agents, Alec considered them. The court guardians watched Alec and Wilt's steps closely, and waited for an excuse to execute direct justice in their sacred hall. For Alec, the legal system was a joke, and he cursed the nights he contemplated of studying for it. The circumstances of tonight did not lighten his disgust for illegitimate proclamations of justice. The uneasy walk to the door ended. I'm sure you know I won't be long. Alec dismissed his guard and entered the courtroom. The courtroom was round and had two podiums to stand at. There was the empty stand of the accused, and adjacent was the stand of the accuser, where two men stood. It was only until Alec saw them did he realize Casimir's victim actually had a family. One man at the stand was older, balding, and rounded glasses. Alec guessed him to be the victim's father. Beside the suspected father was a younger man in a cheap suit, perhaps a brother. Instantly, Alec felt stabbed by the gaze of the suspected brother. His eyes were wide and stuck on him in a vicious, hypnotized hatred. The suspected brother was pinkish in skin, gray in hair regardless of his youth, and had a scar that split his left eyebrow. Alec moved to his stand, and the burning, hot stare pursued. On opposite ends of the room, nearby each stand on the ground, were two bronze bowls of weak flame. These fires did a poor job of lighting the room. It was the third source of light, a red bulb above the balcony that overlooked the courtroom that kept the room in visibility. It was on that balcony overseeing the room where a robed man in an expressionless white mask stood. The judge stood there at his own stand with a gavel in hand. A second robed figure, wearing an executioner's hood, emerged from a chateau on the ground floor. Both parties have assembled. The judgment of Alec Van Tresser shall now commence. The judge above spoke next with his muffled and cold voice. Alec Van Tresser, you stand accused for the murder of Eustace Chaser. How shall you plead? Guilty, Your Honor, Alex said without emotion. So be it, the judge said as plainly. I hereby sentence you to 6 years in Staines first-class prison. The gavel struck the judge's stand on the side of the two accusing men, just as water from the ceiling fell to extinguish the weak fire on Alex's side of the room. The fire on the other side blew up high in a burst of life. What is this? The suspected brother cried out. You call this justice? The judge ignored the outcry. You are to report to your sentence within the next 48 hours. Judgment has been passed. The judge then exited the room through his private door above. This is not acceptable! The brother looked ready to jump at Alec, but his father held to his shoulder tightly. This isn't a trial. This isn't justice. You killed him. Everyone has been drafted for this. Why not you? Wilt opened the door from the prior hall and looked to Alec. He had no words to give, nor did Alec. It was an exceedingly short affair that had already come to overstay its welcome. The two took their leave from the building, but on the way out, they could hear the outrage. We wait for you to come and just get this handed to you. The man's voice cracked with anger. You don't deserve to walk away. You don't deserve any of this. You should be in a trench getting shot at like everyone else. You killer! 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 Alec was offended by the man's ignorance of courtly business. This is how it goes when the family gives say. This is how it goes when men of stature are forced to play with canal-soaked commoners. But to suggest that Alec was a killer? No. To dare believe that he was deserving of a fate worse than this was unforgivable. Alec was internally livid. Casimir's recklessness, Igor's power, and this absolute nobody's opinionated judgment. They all danced around inside Alec's mind, setting his skull on fire, and what they've robbed of him ignited his own hatred. Wilt escorted Alec the rest of the way to the prison. The Staines first-class prison. It was built into its skyscraper, lower than Alex's brothel was built into his. This bothered him. It was a symbolic lowering of his status, and one he would have to endure for 6 long years. The security was light at the prison, less than that would be expected of the state force. The men looked to be taken off the streets and given a uniform. Most of the halls he had passed through to his cell were dented and grossly bland. With the sick clank of the lock behind him, Alec found himself in his 6-year chamber, and it was as ghastly as he imagined. His private prison was that of a gilded 4-star suite, all in a layout that could fit into his office alone. The kitchen is part of the living room? Alec cursed in confusion under his heavy breaths. There was no bar, as he feared, and the decor of the living room was lacking. He imagined his first request would be dedicated to installing a liquor cabinet and commissioning some new paintings. After all, the 2 paintings above the dining set were of boring wilderness. From this odd kitchen lounge atrocity was a small hall with a smaller sitting area at its end. The window to the outside was decent, if not mocking, and many an hour could likely be wasted watching people walk by. Maybe the bright advertisements in the distance could be entertaining when they'd swap out with new ones, Alec thought. The bedroom was simple, with a decent wardrobe. The bathroom, at least, held up to some respectable familiarity with its size and textures. Back in the kitchen, Alec cracked open the first of the low-quality booze hiding in the refrigerator. For hours, Alec sat by the window and observed the swarms of crooks and fools marching by along the many walkways. He wondered when the madness would set in. He heard the door unlock and footsteps enter. Visitors already? He asked himself, unsure of what mood to offer. The footsteps approached and stopped before him. There was no response. Alec turned from his seat to see 2 men. One in a copper, snake-leather jacket and red sweater. He had thick, raised black hair and a bottle of red wine in hand. The other man was taller and bulkier. He was built like an ox, and wore a stained dress shirt with suspenders, and had a shaved head. The red-sweatered man had trimmed sideburns. The larger man had burn marks on his neck. "We brought you some wine," the red-sweatered man said with a sly voice and twitch to his eye. Alex stood shaking his head. "Does anyone understand I don't care for wine?" "That works for me," said the red-sweatered man. "The wine is spiked and it's meant to knock you out." Alex snickered and gave the two an unsure look. "Did Igor send you?" "I spoke with—" The red-sweatered man interrupted Alec by swinging the bottle of wine into his head. With a clunk, Alec was knocked back and tripped over the chair he was sitting in. He fell to the ground, seeing a flash of white with each blink he made. The moment he moved his shaking fingers to where the bottle whacked him, the pain was activated, and it sizzled into his skin. The larger man looked to his partner. "What was that for?" His wording was slow. "I thought the glass would shatter," the red-sweatered man said. "Maybe put some shards in his face." On the ground, Alec was biting his lip and breathing in hard to quell his pain. "He's not out," the larger man said. The red-sweatered man wandered off to look around the living room. "I'll hit him again. This is strong glass." "Give him the wine," the larger man said. "I would like to sell the wine after this," the red-sweatered man said. "Who would buy spiked wine?" the larger man asked with an agitated tone. "An idiot?" The two intruders looked at one another in silence. Then, in unison, they laughed. They both moved their eyes away from the ground and away from the back. The hope was faint, but the opportunity was there. Alex saw a chance to run, and took it. The larger man stopped laughing. "He's running." Alec clumsily stumbled out into the hall, just as the two looked to see him do so. Failing to retrace the steps to the prison lobby, Alec had become frantic and lost in a maze of iron. Each corner led to a new hall, with a new corner, and so on. The footsteps continued after him, and whether from the booze, the blow, or the fear, his vision pulsed in and out of a blur. An opening could be seen after the right turn, a distant room of offices. Help, Alec thought. He made his way down the hall as fast as he could manage. As the opening approached, a gate of metal bars closed in from the side. Locking it from the other side was a scrawny security guard. "No, open it!" Alec cried out. "I've been attacked! You have to help me!" Alec had reached the bars and tried to move them to no avail. The guard looked at him with no real meaning and left. The footsteps from behind were closing in. "Wait! What are you—" It clicked to him. The guard was bought off. No, you son of a—" The footsteps stopped, and Alec turned around to face the two irritated men. "What do you want?" The red-sweatered man reached into his leather jacket and pulled out a small plastic cup. The larger man began to pour the wine into it. Peacefully, the red-sweatered man handed the cup of wine to Alec. For a minute, only voiced by the ambient buzzing of the lights, the offer stood eerily waiting to be taken. Hesitantly, the cup was received. Alec put it to his lips and drank the cup's contents. By defeat alone, he fell back against the bars and slid down to the dusty floor. The last he saw was the two men looking down at him. They became blurred there. That image froze and remained before it, mixed into dreams.